It is a story of a country rising from war. 75 years later, it is a developed and prosperous nation, but still at war. Israel's independence war broke out a few months before the actual independence declaration. In November 1947, a day after the United Nations adopted a resolution calling for the partition of Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, the Arab population began attacking Jewish communities. As the Jewish organizations held the upper hand, their leadership decided to declare the establishment of the State of Israel, which led to the second and far more dangerous phase of this war. Various Arab armies invaded the newborn state. Despite the difficult opening conditions, the IDF, which had just been established, was able to defeat them, and more than a year after it began, Israel's independence war was over. Israel could now focus on building itself, but not for long. In 1956, Egypt blocked the Straits of Tiran, leading from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Eilat, thus shutting down Eilat port, Israel's southern gateway. Israel, in cooperation with the UK and France, embarked on a military operation to open the straits. The Sinai War ended with Israel conquering the entire Sinai Peninsula. Israel eventually withdrew following American pressure, but did enjoy a relatively quiet decade, which ended just as Israel celebrated its 19th Independence Day in 1967. Egyptian forces occupied the Sinai Peninsula, which had been demilitarized after the previous war. Egypt also announced it was joining hands with Syria and Jordan to destroy the Jewish state. Israel was under siege, which was broken in early June as it attacked its three neighbors. 6 days later, Israel more than tripled its size, occupying the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights, leaving Egypt, Jordan, and Syria bitterly defeated. It led Israel to a feeling of euphoria, which was broken 6 years later. In October 1973, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Egyptian and Syrian forces caught Israel by surprise and were able to reclaim, for a few days, some of the land they lost in 1967. The IDF eventually regaining that land, but the initial days of that war and the feeling of defeat completely shook Israeli society. It was 50 years ago, and the last time in which Israel engaged in a formal direct military confrontation with a neighboring state, but that does not mean that wars were over. They have just changed. From now on, wars were mostly against terror organizations, such as the Lebanon War in 1982, meant to expel Palestinian terrorists from Israel's northern border. What was meant to be a short operation was then dragged for years and changed the landscape of southern Lebanon. When Israeli forces finally withdrew, it was Hezbollah terrorists which took over, Israel engaging them in a month-long war in the summer of 2006. Terror organizations taking control of areas just on the Israeli border also came from the south. Various military operations against Hamas in the Gaza Strip took place since the terror organization took over more than 15 years ago, most notably our operations Cast Lead in 2009, Protective Edge in 2014, and Guardian of the Walls 2 years ago. Peace, unfortunately, will not be coming soon as it seems, but Israel will continue to prosper despite the constant security challenges.